Welcome to another edition of Door County Today. I'm your host, Paul Renier of Door County Nature and Travel. It's winter on the peninsula, and while this has been an unusually balmy year, snow has finally arrived. So let's begin the show by exploring cross-country skiing, a silent sport made for the county's beautiful outdoors. In other segments, we'll go to Ellison Bay Pottery, where throwing pots is a true art form. Later, we'll meet Pam Murphy, a unique local painter with a highly personal vision. Then we'll travel back in time with Fred Johnson, publisher of the groundbreaking Door County Almanac series. Historically, skiing started in prehistoric times in the northern Scandinavian countries of Europe. In contrast, cross-country skiing got a late start in North America. In the mid-1850s, Norwegian and Swedish immigrants introduced cross-country skiing to the New World. In general, there's 4 pieces of equipment you'll need to go cross-country skiing. Obviously, you'll need a pair of skis. And skis generally have a built-in binding that's attached to the ski itself, which later on your custom shoes will fit into those. And of course, the ski itself, which is made up of a variety of materials depending on the manufacturer. The ski size is going to depend on your weight and height. So every person should have a pair of skis fitted for them. The boots that are designed for cross-country skis are going to be very specific for the type of bindings that are attached to your skis. Those locking mechanisms are very important to keep your shoe in the binding and allow the skier the comfort and technique that you want when you are cross-country skiing. Shoes are very important in this type of event because the comfort of your feet are more important quite often than any other piece of equipment that you have. There are 2 styles here. There's a multitude of styles for attaching yourself or your feet or your boots into this cross-country ski, depending on what type of mechanism you have. But you can see these 2 types, just as an example, have different pins in the front and also have different grooves that fit onto your ski. This one has 2 grooves and this one has 1. An important part of your equipment is actually the connection between your boot and your ski, which is the binding. You want to be comfortable when you're skiing, and in particular your feet. They're fairly easy to put on. Most systems are pretty much a 1 or 2 step where you connect your boot into the ski binding and then latch in. And then you're in. You'll notice that the only part that's connected is the toe area. The weight of the person will bring this down and give you some additional support. Another design for the binding and shoe connection is where you just step into the shoe and step right into the binding. And then when you want to release, you can take your ski pole and press right here, and your binding will release your shoe. Another piece of essential equipment for cross-country skiing is a properly fitted pole. In general, the poles are fitted towards the height of the person. Very simply, you're once again tying yourself in. Just like your boot gets tied into your ski, you want your hand to be tied into the pole. And there's a little technique that you use for grasping your strap and your pole so you feel comfortable in this range. It should not be loose. Some people use it very loose, but if you can, one of the techniques that you will learn later is you start to get the nice be one with your pole type of concept. There are plenty of areas to ski in Door County in the wintertime. I would recommend trying out our state parks. In particular, Pottery State Park, Whitefish Dune State Park, Peninsula State Park, and Newport State Park. After you've tried a few of those and still looking for more areas to ski, check out our private preserves, some of our county areas, places like the Ridges Sanctuary, and some of the Door County Land Trust properties. There's plenty of variability, different types of habitat, and a host of different experiences that you can enjoy during the winter months in Door County. Sometimes people ask, why ski? Well, the real question should be, why not? Skiing is a great sport. It's enjoyed by millions and millions of people every year. It's fairly easy. It's inexpensive once you've bought your equipment, and it's great for health reasons. It's one of the best conditioning sports that you can find. Cross-country skiing could also offer you an opportunity during the winter months where you can get into areas in the wild or in the parks that you normally can't get to for a variety of reasons during the summer months. So consider it an opportunity to find these hidden places in Door County that you may not otherwise be able to visit. If you're new to cross-country skiing, there's a phrase you'll probably hear, and that's, if you can walk, you can ski. It's that simple. All you need to do is to go out there, have a good time, relax, and have some fun. Visit us often on doorcountytoday.com and have a great time out there.
My name is John Dietrich, and my wife and I run Ellison Bay Pottery. My wife is Diane McNeil, and I've been here since 1974, so that's 37 years. Our family would stop off at the Potter's Wheel when we were visiting in Door County as kids. So there was a kind of a long history with knowing about Abe and the fact that he was one of the Wisconsin's few studio potters. And I had read about studio potting from Bernard Leach, and I thought, wow, that's what I want to do. The 6 years that I spent with Abe and Jinka was very good. They sent me my customers. I didn't realize that I had a client-based business at that time. They'd say, go up to Ellison Bay, hang a left at the Clinky Garage, and he's a half a mile right across from the clearing there. And that's the way it started. If I go back into my past and my childhood, I was interested in working with tools, and I did work with clay as a young child. It was something I had tested and learned and liked a lot, so I persisted. I had no concept of making a career out of it early on. I just felt I could do something, and I wanted to do it. And I think that was key, having the desire to figure it out. You know, pottery making is a process. From making the clay and the glazes to designing, to making equipment, to loading and firing. There's technology involved, there's planning and design and chemistry, physics, math. All these little things that I could piece together, all my little interests that I knew a little bit about, and then I could work outward and learn more about. I began to realize early on that I really liked science. Science was fun. And of course, you mix art and science together. They've been partners forever.
A bunch of years ago, I made some tiles, but they weren't tile, they weren't square, and I call them tiles because they were just flat. And I put designs on there of plants and dragonfly, butterfly, grass, flowers. So the idea was that you were looking through a window outside, and then you were seeing the outside, and I was calling them secret windows because I couldn't think of anything else. It seemed to me that stuck. So I made one. I made a bunch, but only one that I really liked, and then I didn't know what to do with it. I thought, well, I have to hang it on the wall, but I don't know how to do that. So I just pushed it off to the side because that was a problem I didn't want to have to solve then. I had other stuff I wanted to do, and I completely forgot about it. And I pulled it out this summer and put it in the gallery, and it sold in a week, and I was really surprised.
When I work a lot in series, I'll see something, and maybe I'll just suddenly change into another shape that was even more interesting. Just the constant flow of work will influence what I'm doing, because you'll go whoops, and then, wow, that's interesting. Well, maybe I want to repeat that whoops. You know, you can't be in 100% control. And things just happen. You can influence shapes, but basically you want to throw the shape to get a certain flow and evenness in the finished piece.
When I start trying to copy something that I did before, it ends up looking really dead and static. They're trying to find the successful element, But you can't, because the successful element is kind of nebulous. You can hardly put a word on it. And it has a lot to do with the person who's looking at it. Maybe not what I did, but somebody sees something in there that they really like. And they can't put words on it either. And sometimes I go outside and get grasses and flowers, and then I use a rolling pin and I roll it into the slab. And then I cut out the squares so that there is, you know, that natural element in there.
The strategy of, say I want to make a certain shape, you've got to think about what you're doing in the beginning and how to get there. And it may take several pieces to get where you want. Or maybe you'll never make it that day and you'll say, well, okay, it's a bowl day. You just have a good laugh over how your body is telling you, no, you can't do it yet.
I don't have a plan so much as I'm just going to do what feels good. There's no other place in my life that I can do that. So I can experiment and not be worried about wasting materials or ruining anything, because clay is really forgiving. That there's a certain point in there where I get excited. I can feel that. I get excited and interested in what I'm doing, and I think it's going well, and I have good feelings about it, and I'm able to do what I want to do, and I'm happy. So that's good enough for me.
So I'm self-driven to improve on what I do, and sometimes you just have to put blinders on and dive into it and see what happens. Every time you put your finger on clay, you make a recording, and ultimately my standard for making things is, could I give it to my parents?
I look at the figure in the photograph, and there's something interesting to me, compelling about their body language, gesture. You know, even though they're strangers, they're very familiar. And I've had lots of people come up and say, that little girl in that painting looks like me when I was a little girl, or my grandmother. And I like that people bring their own background and history and thoughts and ideas, and they can make their own narrative. They can see what they want to in the image. So I start with canvas, and I gesso the canvas, and then I put down 2 or 3 layers of oil paint that are different colors. And I let that dry, and then I soak the canvases for a week or 2, or you know, however long they sit in a sink of water. And then I scrape. You know, I never know, but like parts of the top layers will stay on. Parts, you know, some things come off, some things don't. So I never know exactly what I'm going to get. These are scraped and ready to go, and I've got you know, an inventory of canvases in the back that I can pull out when I'm ready to work. What I do is I'll get old photo albums and I'll take them apart. I'll put them into categories, like this is girls, little girls, and it's easier for me when I need, when I'm thinking of a painting and I want a picture of a little girl, I can just go to this file and look, rather than looking through albums and albums and albums. Generally what I do is I'll scan them, and then I can blow them up to a size that I can work with more easily and print them on just a cardstock paper. These are some photographs that I've printed on the cardstock, and these are some that I'd like to work with this winter. I saw this picture and it's like, that's a painting. And this little girl, I mean, her gesture, the way she's seated, her body language is just fabulous. And I guess in general what attracts me to a particular photograph or a figure in a photograph is the gesture, the body language. I prefer more snapshots than the posed studio portraits of the late 19th century. For the most part, people look different in photographs to me now than they used to. I use an opaque projector to position and size the image on the canvas, and I'll do a very rough charcoal sketch. And then I go in with charcoal, and I'll do a more finished drawing, which is the point that this one is at. And then I go in with white paint and I paint the figures and end up with basically a value painting, black and white painting. And then again, once that's dry, the colors go on as glazes afterwards. When I paint, you'll notice, I guess is a little unusual, I paint unstretched. And I do that for obvious reasons, because I need the hard surface behind there. And occasionally I'll do a little sanding and such. And then I also like the fact that it gives me some freedom to crop and change the image. When I'm finished, I use pieces of white paper and pin them up there to delineate the edges of the painting, and sometimes I'll look at it when the image is finished, and I'll say, well, it probably would look better if there was an inch more on this side and an inch less on the other side. When I was in Pakistan, I actually learned, at National College of Art, they have a degree program in Persian Indian miniature painting, so I was fortunate enough to be able to study that while I was there. But it's not, I'm not really using the technique in these oil paintings. It's more, like I said, it's more about the patterning that I use, and the stylized elements come from Persian Indian miniature paintings. The first thing I did when I bought the farm, which I live on, and my studio is in the barn, was to put in a garden, a vegetable garden. So I spent a lot of time in the summer with that, and you know, in between painting, go out and take my breaks or out in the garden, and I started keeping bees shortly after that, and then the rest of the animals came after that, and right now I'm fairly close to being off the food grid. I have chickens, ducks, geese, dairy goats, and meat rabbits. A few years ago, I took a workshop in encaustic painting. I've always been interested in work that has a lot of texture and kind of an interesting surface. Encaustics, I took a workshop and then experimented for a few years, trying to find my way with the medium. Kind of come to a way of painting that I think works well with my imagery. And it's kind of fun to do the two different mediums. Living in Door County, it doesn't really affect my work in a very specific direct way, but more in an indirect way. It's just the place that I'm living sort of enables me to focus and to make the work. I think if I was living in a big city, there might be too many distractions.
I wanted to do a kind of a literary arts type magazine back in the 70s, I guess it was. And Kevin Combs, a friend of mine who had been kind of trying to get a press started with me, really came up with the idea for the Almanac. And I think he probably came up with the title for it too, I'm not sure. I came up with the spelling for it, I know that. Why not spell it differently and put a K at the end? And it's a Door County Almanac, but it's not an almanac. And it just looks a lot nicer with that K in there. It was Kevin, me, and Pat McNamara. Pat went out and sold ads. We figured we'd do ads to support it. Quite a few people got interested in it. There really hadn't been anything like it before that I know of. And it kind of took off, you know, and grew. Came up with the idea of the first book to do shipbuilding. We wanted it to be individual articles about different things, but related to the same subject matter. The first one, the cover was from a woodcut by Frederick Victor Poole, the artist that had a summer place in Bailey's Harbor in the 20s and the 30s and taught at the Art Institute in Chicago. I knew his son and daughter-in-law then, they lived in Bailey's Harbor, and they said, sure, go ahead and use it. After the first issue, I split from, because I wanted to do my handmade books and stuff, and they started working on the second issue, but weren't able to continue because they didn't have the money to do it. And I ended up getting together with Lon Kapitsky from the Door Minder, and he was willing to back it, and so we took it over from them. And then I did the entire books myself. Basically, they did the typesetting at the Reminder, and I did all the layout and finding people to write. But then people started to approach me, so I didn't have to go looking all the time for people to do stuff. People came wanting to do something, and with ideas too. The second one, that was on orchards. The third one, I did fishing for the subject matter. And then the fourth one was on farming. The fifth one was on tourism and related things to tourism. When we did the first book, we probably set kind of a size for it. And I think that had to do with money too, what it would cost to get it printed. And then because it was the first one and we weren't sure When I started on the second one, it just seemed like there was a lot of stuff out there to put in it. Kind of used, I guess, mostly everything I could get. I wanted to save some of the history of Door County, the things that were being forgotten about, that we tried to get, people interviewed, and, if somebody doesn't write it down, it's just forgotten. Some of the stuff I reprinted things from some old books that I found too, because they're not around. There was one on, I think it's in the Orchard one, that I'd never seen before. It was about the early days in the county. I wanted them to look good, and I wanted to use good art in it, and ask all the artists around that I knew if they'd do something for it. And most of them were willing to do a little drawing or something. A lot of people did stuff in all the books. There was Conan Bryan Eaton from Washington Island, and he wrote a few articles in the first one on shipping, and he did one on fisheries in the book on fishing. He knew a lot. He knew a lot of history. He had been studying it for a long time and was either in his 80s or 90s then. And then John Enigal from Carlsville wrote articles in almost all the rest of the books on the orchards and farming and tourism too. He researched them. He knew a lot. He knew a lot of the people anyhow. His family went way back there. So he liked writing the historical articles and was a big help to the Almanac. In the Door County Almanac on tourism, there was one article that had a personal connection for my family. 3 articles on Maxwell Braes, which was built by my uncle, Michael McArdle, who was the president of Sunbeam in Chicago, and he bought up the old family farm area there and built Maxwell and Braes. I think when he was over in Scotland that he came up with the idea, or the name. Opened in 1929, the first 9 holes. And my mother ran the, they call it the Wee Inn, I think, was the little lunch counter that was in that building that's right along the highway there, I believe. One of the articles in the Tourism Almanac was on the Liberty Park Resort, which is basically gone now. The lodge is still there, but everything else has been torn down. 2 of the cottages were moved to the Sister Bay Historical Society. The Liberty Grove Historical Society got one for up in Ellison Bay too. That was one of the major resorts in Sister Bay at one time. People would take the steamships up here and get off at Razor's Dock and spend the summer at Liberty Park. All the almanacs are still available. We have them down at the Sister Bay Historical Society at the Corner of the Past Museum in the summer when it's open. We have some there for sale. Pastimes Books in Sister Bay sells them. Caxton Books in Ellison Bay sells them. Badger Bibliophile in Egg Harbor Old Orchard Antique Mall, and online. You can search for them and find them, though they're cheaper in Door County.
Thank you for joining us today. Remember to come back often to learn about Door County's history, landscapes, businesses, and people. I'm Paul Renier for Door County Today. See you next time.